The 1993 Super Mario Bros. Movie raised and traumatized an entire generation of Nintendo lovers. Millennials were introduced to Mario by a game of the same name released by Nintendo in 1985. And naturally, when a theatrical project was on the cards, we couldn't keep calm. We spent days imagining how it would turn out. You know, like how would Mario and Luigi run through chaotic streets, leaping over gaps and fire hydrants, and most importantly, how they would show them sliding through the warp pipes to reach new worlds. I can't even explain the amount of expectation we had from this movie, which got shattered in moments. Oh, it even hurts to say this, but Super Mario Bros. Infamously flopped at the box office. It angered critics and scared kids, and frankly, parents too, who had no idea that they bought popcorn for a dark and dystopian theater experience. The movie rightly disappeared from the public's eyes and minds, but created an irreparable hole in the hearts of gamer millennials. So, what actually went wrong with such a highly anticipated project? And no matter how horrible it was, why can't we still forget it? Let's find out everything that ruined Super Mario Bros. Of 1993, and how the movie is making noise again. It's no news that the game Super Mario Bros. Was a huge hit and literally got kids glued to their consoles. When Hollywood caught a whiff of its popularity, their eyes practically turned into dollar signs, and numerous producers tried to purchase the rights to make a Super Mario Bros. Movie. In the meantime, Dustin Hoffman attempted to get the rights to produce a film with himself as Mario, but this idea fell through. Then, Jake Eberts bought the film rights and started developing an adaptation with Penny Marshall as his proposed director. Enter another producer, Roland Joffe, who first came up with the idea of making a live-action adaptation of video games during a script meeting at Leitmotiv, which was Ebert's production company. Joffe met Nintendo of America's then-president, Minoru Arakawa, and Hiroshi Yamauchi's son-in-law. He presented Arakawa with an initial version of the script, and after a month he went to Nintendo's headquarters in Kyoto to present the story idea to Yamauchi, which drew the company's interest in the project. Joffe secured a $2 million agreement that gave him temporary rights to the Mario character. Why did Nintendo sell the rights, you may think? Sure, Joffe assured them that they would have more creative control over the project, but that wasn't their motivation. In fact, Nintendo did not try to control it tightly because they believed that the Mario brand was strong enough to be experimented on by an outside industry. Anyway, back in the day, this was good progress. Now it was time for writing, and that's when Super Mario Bros. Fell into production hell. We know the most common trouble associated with that phrase. The first screenplay was penned by Barry Morrow, who was reeling from his Oscar win for writing the screenplay of Rain Man, 1988. However, it seemed like he was still hungover from the Academy Awards after-party because his story followed the brothers on an existential road trip, and it was so damn similar to Rain Man that the production called his script Drain Man. Ouch. But Morrow defended his script, saying that he was going for a more contrast-driven story, similar to classic duos like Laurel and Hardy with an adventurous journey inspired by the game. Co-producer Fred Caruso later noted that it leaned more towards serious drama than lighthearted comedy. That means goodbye Morrow. Next, the makers brought in the writing team of Jim Genuine and Tom S. Parker to create a more traditional retelling of the game. He and Parker thus wanted to satirize fairy tale stereotypes and focus on the relationship between Mario and Luigi. At this point, Greg Beeman, known for helming License to Drive of 1988, was attached to the project and even moved into pre-production. Unfortunately, his movie Mom and Dad Save the World of 1992 failed, which made the producers nervous. So they did what any investor would do, dismiss him out of the blue. Joffe then asked Harold Ramis to direct the movie. He was known for being a fan of the video game and could have been a good choice, but Ramis politely declined and later said that he was glad he did so. Burn! Joffe later admitted that they tried a bunch of directions that just didn't work out. While some felt too medieval, others were just plain wrong, and he could already sense the project slipping out of control. That's when, for reasons only 90s Hollywood can explain, he turned to Max Headroom for inspiration. Yes, Joffe literally thought, why not make a Mario Brother movie with a glitchy, cyberpunk aesthetic? If only he knew that considering the TV host show as the creative North Star for Super Mario Bros. Was the beginning of a disaster. Anyway, he then promptly flew to Rome to meet Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel. Their approach was to start with rooting things in reality before exaggerating rhythm as much as possible for fun. Okay. Together, they took arguably the most blasphemous decision in the history of filmmaking. The film shouldn't be a bright, cheerful fantasy like the game, but something grittier like Batman 1989. Jaffe even made it clear that this wasn't going to be some cute fairy tale. Nope, this was going to be intense. And Morton? Oh boy, he did not hold back. He went a step further and called it a prequel, and claimed it to be the true story behind the games, while Jaffe described it as a cocktail of Japanese fairy tales and modern America, aiming for a mythic version of New York City. Just in case this wasn't chaotic enough, they also pulled inspiration from Die Hard and Mad Max. Because obviously, when you think of Mario, you think post-apocalyptic thriller with dinosaurs, right? Ugh, it's been decades and my blood still boils even when I talk about this. Wait, before I rant further, here's what they ended up making the movie about. The movie kicks off with a meteor hitting Earth and somehow splitting the universe into 2 dimensions. And one of them is a place where didn't go extinct. Instead, they evolved into humanoid creatures and built a city called Dino Hatton. I'm convinced that they only used 1 brain cell while naming the city. In 1973, a mysterious woman left a large egg and a piece of the meteorite in a Catholic orphanage in Brooklyn. Cut to 20 years later, Mario and Luigi are just regular plumbers trying to survive capitalism, until Luigi meets Daisy, an archaeology student digging up dinosaur bones under a bridge. Things started spiraling fast, with Daisy getting kidnapped by President King Koopa's goons, who are from the dinosaur dimension, where Koopa is a power-hungry dictator. The abduction gets super messy, by the way, and the henchmen end up taking Mario's girlfriend Danielle too. Obviously, the brothers end up chasing them through a random interdimensional portal and reach Dino Hatton. Honestly, when I saw it, my brain went like, ah yes, molten cheese on a lava-lit rock wall, and I haven't recovered since. Things get even weirder. Now, Daisy turns out to be a literal dinosaur princess, and her dad, wait for it, is a literal fungus. And I thought meeting my girlfriend's dad was scary. Mario and Luigi run around teaming up with a half-human Goomba, a tiny Yoshi, and a sweet-natured guitarist, Toad, and even the villain's minions who randomly switch sides. And then there was a fragment of the meteorite which could merge the 2 dimensions, but guess what? It was stolen by a bouncer of a local nightclub, Big Bertha. No, we don't look for logic here. In the end, Koopa tries to invade Brooklyn and gets turned into a Tyrannosaurus Rex before finally devolving into slime. Wait, someone interfered! It was none other than Lena, Koopa's jealous girlfriend who tried to kill Daisy. She managed to fossilize her. Yeah, no biggie I guess. Daisy then restores her dad from fungus form, who regains his position immediately. The brothers then go back home like nothing had happened. Now, right when you think it's over, Daisy shows up again, asking them to go on another mission. I mean, the makers had the balls to leave a room open for sequels. That's the kind of confidence I aspire to have. Some of us still question what actually happened in those 104 minutes. Coming back to direction, when Morton and Jankel already leaped forward with this questionable concept, you'd think they were at least sure on the writer's front. Nope. At first they worked with Parker Bennett and Terry Runte. Things were going fine, until the producers decided the script was too comedic. So Bennett and Runte were shown the door and replaced by British writers Dick Clement and Ian LaFrenne to make things more adult. For the dinosaurs, they decided to stop using their big brains and pull from Super Mario World and its dinosaur dimension idea. But visually, I can't help but find how Blade Runner-ish it was. The place looked like a fair gone rogue, with Vote for Koopa popping up here and there before it cuts to show normal city streets, but with what looked like huge dinosaur skins hanging everywhere. Once again, they brought back Parker Bennett and Terry Runte and tasked them with rewriting it to balance comedy with a darker tone. Time to get into the casting, and that's one place the makers did a decent job. In fact, ever since Leitmotiv locked in the rights, their heads were bubbling with actors' names because, believe it or not, Michael Keaton and Arnold Schwarzenegger were offered the role of Koopa, but thankfully, both of them turned it down, because no way any of us could have survived Arnold doing this. The studio then considered Tom Hanks as Luigi, but his recent box office failure dropped him from consideration. In the end, Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo were ultimately cast as Mario and Luigi, but casting Hoskins was a pain in the ass. Initially, Hoskins did not like the script and did not want to do another children's film after Roger Rabbit. However, Jaffe kept sending script rewrites till he finally accepted the role. Hoskins, however, was in no mood to prep for the role. All he had to do was say that he was in the right shape, got a mustache, and worked as a plumber's apprentice for 3 weeks, and somehow set his boots on fire with a blowtorch. Method acting much? Leguizamo said yes because he was excited to finally flip the game, pointing out how actors like Al Pacino had played Latin roles, and now it was their turn. Even the side characters were brought on board hastily. Mojo Nixon got cast as Toad because they wanted a real musician, but couldn't get Tom Waits. So they settled for what his agent basically pitched as a third-rate Tom Waits, for half the price. But for the time being, they thought it was perfect. Last but not least, Dennis Hopper came in as Koopa, who made it very clear that he was in there for the money and basically had no clue about what he was doing because his lines kept getting rewritten at the last minute, again and again. It led to a massive fallout between him and the directors. One day, dressed as a humanoid dinosaur in heavy makeup and while sweating like a pig, Hopper lost it. He walked in furious, barely speaking to anyone, and then exploded at the directors. "You rewrote my lines! You call this writing? This is shit!" What followed was pure mayhem. For 45 minutes straight, Hopper just kept yelling. Crew members stood around watching while producers checked their watches. The rest of the unit watched it like a live entertainment show, and I don't blame them. It was probably more engaging than the movie itself. Meanwhile, 300 extras were left waiting around with zero idea about what was happening. The directors eventually gave in, begging him to tell them what he wanted, and even offered to let him rewrite the entire scene. And after all that, Hopper finally calmed down and said they could just shoot it as written. In fact, the experience with Hopper was filled with nothing but mutual hatred. Morton claimed that working with him was really hard, while Hopper noted that it was a nightmare. Hoskins too had a horrible experience. He expressed his anger in a 2007 interview, and when asked about the worst decision in his acting career, Hoskins responded that it was Super Mario Bros. And let's say he too said some pretty harsh words about the director duo. Apparently, their own agents told them to leave the set. Hoskins even revealed that he and Leguizamo got drunk before filming every day and even continued to drink whiskey in between shots to deal with the situation. Surprisingly, his and Leguizamo's performance was something which got praised amidst the otherwise catastrophe. Reviewers like Mark Caro of the Chicago Tribune stated that the movie was terrible, but Hoskins and Leguizamo's brotherly dynamic was the only redeeming quality. So why were lines still being changed at the last minute? Because the producers too couldn't help themselves from interfering. Now, when the movie managed to move into pre-production, Jaffe and Ebert started to panic. They suddenly felt that the film had drifted way off from being a fun, family-friendly movie and had turned into this effects-heavy monster that was way too expensive to shoot. Basically, budget issues knocked some sense into them when potential investors and distributors like Disney did not show interest at the darker tone. And on the other hand, the crew got to work. They started building a massive set inside an old cement factory in North Carolina, turning it into a 5-story mega complex that had previously been used for films like Terminator 2. Production designer David L. Snyder wanted to go for a detailed, futuristic city. It sounded cool to them, but not to the funders' pockets, because no one could really understand how it was supposed to pass as a Mario movie. So, what did the producers do? Talking to the directors would have been a normal move, but I've accepted that nobody did normal here. Instead, they quietly brought in new writers, Ed Solomon and Ryan Rowe, to fix things and make it work. This sudden move was also pushed by a studio that had recently bought the distribution rights and clearly wanted something more marketable. Now, Morton and Jankel were understandably furious and even thought about quitting, but then they convinced themselves that no one else could possibly understand this chaos well enough to finish it. I guess they personified narcissism. Plus, they felt responsible for the cast and crew. So they stayed. Rowe eventually went on to work on something else, but Solomon stuck around, rewriting things for a few more weeks. And then, because this story just keeps getting better, Bennett and Runte showed up uninvited in Wilmington and got back to work like nothing ever happened. And no one even stopped them. My wedding was less chaotic than this, I swear to God. The screenplay was in such a serious flux that Richard Edson and Fisher Stevens, who played King Koopa's goons, wanted to take matters into their own hands. Edson mentioned that by the time he started filming, the script had changed completely from the draft he had got. They realized the dialogues they were saying were absolute bullshit, and improvised their own lines. At this point, the writers couldn't care less. They were rather happy that they made their own lines. Things got worse when Solomon got another call within just 2 weeks into filming, and whatever hope he had left was gone. He thought he'd finally made the script somewhat coherent, with actual characters and a story that made sense. But when he arrived, he found that Morton had taken it, chopped it up, and turned it into a badly made collage. There was neither any flow nor structure. A production like that is bound to affect the crew, and it did. No one on set seemed to know what was happening, leave alone the actors. Even the production designers or the VFX team had no clue what they were working on. The one thing that held them together was one emotion, and that was, what the hell is going on? Samantha Mathis, who played Daisy, also agreed that it was no doubt an extremely troubled shooting. A few weeks into what was supposed to be a neat 10-week shoot, the LA Times sent a journalist to check in, and that's when the rest of the industry got a sniff that things were falling apart. The reporter's findings were basically the nail in the coffin. He saw a cast and crew who were quietly losing their minds and learned that the directors, Morton and Jankel, had even earned themselves a nickname, the Hydra, because apparently there were too many heads giving orders and no one actually in control. As the planned schedule came to an end, another disaster struck the crew. They were nowhere close to finishing. Yes, there were still at least 2.5 to 3 weeks of shooting left, but the money was pretty much gone. As a result, a massive finale on the Brooklyn Bridge full of special effects had to be scrapped entirely. The day after the newspaper article was published, Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel were dropped as clients by the Creative Artists Agency. Now that was practically a death sentence in 1992. The CAA was led by super agent Michael Ovitz, and he and his associates controlled access to big shots like Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise, Barbra Streisand, Sylvester Stallone, and so on and so forth. So if one wanted those big names, they had to go through them. And CAA didn't play nice either. They preferred their clients to work only with other CAA clients. In short, Morton and Jankel were now on an industry-wide blacklist. Since the agency cut ties with Morton and Jankel when they begun post-production on Super Mario Bros., the producers decided to take control. They told the directors, Morton and Jankel, "You can leave now. We're going to make the rest of the movie without you." Understandably, Morton and Jankel were both furious and humiliated. I know, they weren't doing the best work out there. Still, they were the directors, dude. In fact, the disrespect continued. Morton has said that he was locked out of the editing room and had to get the DGA to come and help him get back inside the room. The couple was so hurt that they didn't even watch the film when it first released. Super Mario Bros. Premiered on May 28, 1993, and domestically, it grossed around only $21 million, which was roughly half of what it cost to make. It has a shameful rating of 27% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a score of 35 out of 100 on Metacritic. Roger Ebert and his co-host Gene Siskel gave the film not 1 but 2 thumbs down. Yeah, that man was brutal at times. Super Mario Bros. Essentially nuked Morton and Jankel's career in Hollywood, and they did not make another movie for decades. The couple returned to commercials and independent projects, though Jankel did return in 2018 with Tell It to the Bees. Scriptwriter Solomon claimed that he could never bring himself to watch the movie, and claimed that he did everything he could to save it. Mathis, too, watched the movie only once and was done with it, while Edson stated that he would not like to recall if he ever saw it. All that being said, the film has garnered somewhat of a cult status, according to producer Jaffe. Though I could never make peace with what they did to poor Mario and Luigi. It turns out, there are actually viewers who enjoyed the movie. Hey, you do you. No hard feelings. But I'm gonna give Super Mario Bros. Credit where it's due, and I get why some people still defend the movie. Firstly, the casting of Mario and Luigi actually worked. As I said, both Hoskins and Leguizamo were greatly appreciated for their performance. The film followed a different approach than how they were treated as equals in Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Instead, they showed Luigi as Mario's younger and slightly cooler brother rather than his equal, and the responsible older brother versus naive younger brother felt relatable to many. People consider it to be a little ahead of its time. It was one of the first films to use CGI software like Autodesk Flame, which was still in beta back then. That means no matter how small, it did play some role in shaping the future of visual effects. A lot of the crew involved in the VFX work, especially the editor-in-chief Applebaum, actually look back on it with pride. Last but not least, there's the nostalgia factor. For a lot of millennials and younger Gen X kids, this was their first video game movie. Yes, it was messy, but it helped push video games and Nintendo further into mainstream pop culture at a time when parents were still unsure about them. Interestingly, a lot changed during the 30th anniversary of the movie, and Super Mario Bros. Saw an unexpected rise in its cinematic status. Umbrella Entertainment released a 30th anniversary 4K collector set and a special screening held at none other than Quentin Tarantino's New Beverly Cinema. Yes, Tarantino gave a nod to Morton in his podcast, the Video Archives podcast. Morton and Jenkel went for the screening to watch the movie for the first time, which was made 3 decades back, and while they hoped there would be barely 10 or 20 people, the filmmakers were pleasantly surprised to find the theater jam-packed and people queuing up for extra tickets. Despite the recent recognition, the 1993 film damaged Mario's co-creator Shigeru Miyamoto's trust, but the reception of the movie scared Miyamoto, and that's exactly why, when the Super Mario Bros. Movie of 2023 was being made, Miyamoto co-produced the film with Meledandri and oversaw literally everything. To answer the question with which we started, what the hell happened to Super Mario Bros. Of 1993? A lot, actually. But the primary issue was constant script changes and power struggle between directors, producers, studios, and actors. No one seemed to be on the same page, and sadly, neither did they get any help from Nintendo itself. Looking back, yes, Morton and Jenkel did pull an oopsie-daisy, but to some extent, time wasn't on their side either. And to be fair, the industry has been a little too harsh on them because everyone deserves a second chance. Alright guys, that's all for today. I'm not saying I can totally forgive what the team did to Mario, but after all this discussion, I guess I'm ready to give it another try. What do you think? Was Super Mario Bros. As bad as it is reputed, or was it just perceived wrongly? Do let us know in the comments below. Also, if you liked our video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!